Hello and welcome, everyone. I am super excited to have Jill doing this webinar today. She is awesome. I'll share a little bit about Jill with all of you. She has been on our team for a couple of years now. I can't even remember. Yeah. And I'm delighted to have her as part of the team. She helps our support team. She also is one of our trainers. Jill is a credentialed coach. She's currently got her ACC credential and is working on her PCC. So she's in process for that. She has a company called Jill Wilt Consulting, and she specializes in coaching for career development and transition. She does provide coaching services for a couple of organizations devoted to emotional wellness. Prior to moving into the coaching space, she was in HR, both in director and VP level internal positions. Also, as an outside consultant, coaching is her passion. So that's pretty excited. She has a Master of Science degree in HR management and organizational behavior, and a Bachelor of Arts in speech communication and theater from the University of Washington. So all of us, let's welcome Jill. Thank you for being here with us, Jill.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and really look at these two worlds of HR and coaching and see how they intersect. I believe Kathy is going to launch a poll just to see where we are all coming in from, and we'll take a look at that. Taking a look at where you are, if your role is specifically in HR, if your role has some HR and coaching in it, and if your role is coaching. So I'm seeing the numbers coming in now. It looks like we've got almost a little bit of everything, and
everybody has responded.
Everybody has responded. So we have a mix here of HR with some coaching involved, some that are 100% involved in coaching, and then something else. So thank you all for participating in that. Moving on, I'm going to share the results. So let's take a look at this journey in our focus, and looking at our focus. And we all know that word focus as a coaching area that is important with our clients, focusing on the agreement, focusing on what they want to focus on in the conversation, focusing on their agenda. Let's take a look at that shift from focus on the company goals, to focus on the client. So in looking at this, let's take a look at our own agenda. Our job as an HR leader, what does that mean? That dividing line, focus area of how we focus, so important. How does this all intersect with performance? Who decides what that focus is? And HR leaders who coach in an organization, what considerations are necessary? What do we need to pay attention to? And then questions. Transforming those questions of how we ask questions. What does that look like? So let's take a look at our job in terms of performance management. We all, as HR leaders or former HR leaders, or those of us who've had HR in our job description, know the importance of performance management. Very different look and feel when we are in HR versus when we are coaching. So taking a look further at performance management, I want to put this out there to the group. What differences do you see in performance management for those of you who are in HR, have been involved in HR? What differences do you see between HR and coaching?
And you're welcome to unmute and join the conversation live. I hope you're comfortable doing that. And alternatively, you can put it in the chat box. So let's hear some voices.
Hi, Jill. How are you defining performance management first and foremost?
Oh, great question. When I think of performance management from an HR perspective, I'm thinking in terms of how do you reach the goals? How does that impact your performance as an individual contributor or on a team? How does that relate to company goals? Even how does it affect your career trajectory within an organization?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I know for me, I think performance management and coaching are very intertwined. I mean, not only do I do coaching throughout my organization, but I also manage the entire performance management cycle. So I'm constantly speaking to, others that are not on my direct team about how goals kind of work and what they can kind of do, but more so from a coaching perspective, because I can't define what their goals are for them, but I have to lead them to that water, if you will, to get them to really think about how the goals, whether they're organizational goals or departmental goals, really impact their world.
Yeah. What a great image, leading them to the water. And Christine, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so in my organization, they're one and the same. Our performance management is all about coaching. We don't have any type of rating system. We've done away completely with that, and it's all about coaching conversations. And so really teaching our leaders how to be coaches. So our HR functions, and I'm in HR as well, but our functions really are more, we'll coach different levels just depending where you are in HR and what your role is. So you may be coaching the team member if it's career development and helping them with those kinds of things, or coaching leaders. I also coach HR leaders, and what they, how to best utilize the tools that we have. So in our organization, we're about 2 years into it, but that's really where they're so connected that there is really not a difference. It's just part of what we do as HR. It's part of what we do as any leader in any department.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great. Sounds like a good transition is coming on there.
Yeah, it's a slow one, but
slow one.
it's right, because in job descriptions for a leader, it doesn't say that you're a coach. It's nowhere in any job description, right? But that's really what we're asking them to do is to be a coach. And we actually teach, we have a course for them that helps them with that in relation to specific organizational initiatives that we have. So we try to give them at least the tools to give them a foundation of what to do, and then HR helps them, beyond that.
Great. Well, really great ideas there of what you are currently doing and how that relates to the performance management, both of the HR leaders, of the team. And further defining that, we as HR leaders really get involved in defining those performance standards in many cases. And also we, as part of our job description in HR, many of us get involved in tracking, monitoring employee performance. We get involved in when things go wrong, some of the disciplinary notices that happen as we monitor and track employee performance. And as HR leaders, we help in resolving employee relations issues. We also operate as strategic management partners in our role as HR, where we specifically integrate solutions that work towards the company goals and really emphasis on the company goals. We help to develop and execute company-wide initiatives and again, drive leadership goals. So notice that focus, company goals, leadership goals. And we may plan and organize career development opportunities. So really putting those opportunities out in front of the employees to really encourage them, help them towards career development. All great things. We help to drive employee engagement. Also part of what we do. And that word I used very specifically, we are driving the employee engagement. Very different. So I want to take a deeper look down at that, what I call the dividing line between our role as an HR leader versus our role as a coach, which, as Christine pointed out, may not be anywhere in our title, may not be anywhere in our job description, and yet here we are doing it. So when we look at the idea of being an HR leader, again, we are strategizing with the company leadership. Whereas when we look at the coaching side of the aisle, we're partnering with our clients. Different focus. When we look at our role as an HR leader, our focus is really on company initiatives. Very different to that question that we ask our clients of what is meaningful to them. Sets the agenda, sets the agreement, sets the tone, sets the focus. When we look at our role as an HR leader, success in many cases equates to promotions. It may lead to internal promotions. It may lead to movement within the organization, movement on a different team. It is how success is measured in many cases within an organization. When we coach, one of those questions that is necessary for us to ask is, how does our client define success? Very different. As an HR leader, the performance conversations are designed to meet specific performance goals. Whereas as a coach, our coaching conversations explore what the client's goals are and focus on what those goals are overall in the coaching engagement and specifically in each and every coaching session. As an HR leader, the performance is the specific focus. Their performance as an employee, their performance as an individual contributor or team member, that is the focus. When we coach, in many cases, we coach the whole person. That is the focus. when we work from a perspective of an HR leader, we're exploring roadblocks specific to achieving the desired performance that the company defines. When we coach, we explore the roadblocks to achieving the client's goals that question what may get in the way. And when we ask questions in an HR conversation, we're asking questions to explore what's getting in the way of performing. Again, that word performing with the focus on performing to meet the company standards. When we coach, we're asking questions with the goal of helping our clients explore beyond their current thinking. So in looking at these differences, what stands out to you the most?
I do. Really the focus on the human being who, whole person that is going to perform. And the more that we focus on, how, the different aspects of the person, the more performance we will, see and get. So yeah, definitely partnering with the clients and having that focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you think about the difference between coaching within an organization from an HR perspective versus coaching an individual, when you coach an individual, the parameters are set by the individual, but within a company, the parameters are set by strategic leadership, what the goals, objectives, everything is for the company. So there's more of a constraint in terms of the flexibility that you will have in what you explore with the client in a company setting.
Yeah, that's such a great word that you brought up, is that constraint. That constraint that really restricts what we can and can't do, to your point.
And probably actually a better word would be parameter, because constraint is almost like a negative word, but there are parameters that are set. So you can optimize things within those parameters, but there are set parameters by the company.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
We've been having an interesting conversation about that, Phil, in the ethics community of practice. And a lot of it is based on the contracting phase. So when you go in and you contract with a company, for example, the contract where we're placing all the graduates right now, that particular organization is very savvy to what coaching is and how it works. And they don't tell us the objectives. The individual clients really control that. So how savvy the organization is in terms of coaching and how it works and the power of it is can play into the flexibility. And then the other part to that flexibility is how much we negotiate with the company and say, hey, if you're dictating the objectives, it's going to limit what the value is of the coaching. So it's, yeah, there's a lot of pieces to how much they decide what the focus is. Yeah.
And one way to think about that within particularly a larger organization, and some of the comments that Jill made earlier about what people are, or excuse me, Jill didn't make the comments, I can't remember who did, about what's expected, that you're expected to coach, but you're not really necessarily given the tools to coach. I recently did an engagement with a very small company coaching for the leadership team, and was very clear that it kind of needs to be open-ended in terms of what the individuals want. So what you're talking about, Kathy, I had that freedom to, in the contracting phase, to say the conversations between the coach and the client are confidential between the coach and the client, and the company was fine with that. So I had the flexibility to really do more of the coaching, but my experience, particularly in larger organizations or corporations, maybe 5,000 people or more, there is that expectation that you will coach in your role, but oftentimes people that end up in a management role, particularly when they're new in management, sometimes management is, we're giving you a lot more responsibility, and some of that is people management responsibility. We're not necessarily taking away some of your other responsibilities. So there is that expectation to coach, but not necessarily the tools to coach well. But I think that's changing to where coaching is becoming a much greater part of the conversation in terms of company success. So I think there's more opportunity. It's a positive future in terms of where things will go for coaching within organizations, from my perspective.
Yeah, great point. And I'm cheering that that positive direction on. Right there with you, Phil. And I also see that Christine, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to share, and being an internal consultant or an internal coach, right? It's a little different, certainly than coming from the outside. And I'm really blessed in our organization because we do focus on that whole person, and so it's part of what we do. We focus on obviously the performance and the career piece and where people want to go and what are their aspirations. But we also have people that we have a dedicated team that focuses on the health piece, the physical and the mental health piece, as well as the spiritual. So we have, we have chaplains and pastoral staff that where they can get coaching, if you want to use that word, right? But on that side of the thing. So, it's really nice because we do have resources available within our organization that we can refer people to. If I'm having a conversation with someone around career development and it just comes out, right? That wasn't the intent of it, but it comes out, right? And they're obviously going through something. And so, I have the ability to have that conversation and talk to them about that, and that's okay in our organization. But if they need something beyond what I can provide, I know where to send them, right? And we're just really, really fortunate, and a lot of that is informal. We do have some formal mentoring and coaching programs, but a lot of our stuff is informal, where the team members drive. If you want coaching, this is where you go. This is how but you've got to drive it. It's a partnership. It's not your manager's responsibility. They need to partner with you, but we've kind of really put the onus on team members to say it's here for you.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's good.
Great. Thank you for that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, we're very, very fortunate. We're very fortunate.
So when we look at the aspect of performance, again, part of that HR focus, who decides? So again, coming at it from two different perspectives, when we come at it from a perspective of HR traditionally, that role, and then the other perspective as coaches. Sometimes we're both, sometimes we're one, sometimes we're the other. When we look at logistically what we do, our output, we look at performance reviews. Now, I will say that the landscape is consistently changing with this. Many companies have shifted from formal performance reviews to more informal check-ins. So with that eye moving forward, that the landscape is changing. When we look at a coaching perspective, that performance success is determined by our client. Different timetable, different measures, different definitions. In HR, we may be familiar with PIPs, with performance improvement plans, and one sometimes drives the other. Performance drives those introduction of performance improvement plans. When we look at coaching, that career roadmap of where our client wants to go is really determined by our client. When we look at it from an HR perspective, performance is a road to promotions within the company. in many cases where our clients are headed. When we look at coaching in terms of what success means, again, is determined by our client. Really important distinction. Let's talk a little bit about HR leaders who coach internally, which I am seeing from our audience, many do. Some really important considerations. Separation of HR and coaching functions, some of the physical considerations that we have. For instance, you're an HR director, you need to have an HR conversation. Those physical considerations, if you have one office. So important that we learn as part of our training that separation of those roles, separations of the functions, what physical considerations we have in terms of separating the space, separating the time, separating the room, and really making sure that we hone in on that difference between when we function as an HR leader and when we function as a coach. Of course, everything all ties back to ethics in terms of our confidentiality of what Kathy's cheering me on here, and everything goes back to what we learn as part of our core learning as coaches. It all comes back to the code of ethics of separating the two functions of confidentiality. Really, really important in what we do. Within that code of ethics, of course, we have all learned about recording and note-taking considerations in terms of what we are recording, if we are recording, where we are recording, what outside devices may be recording that we need to turn off, note-taking, how we do it, where we do it, how secure, how confidential, all of those so important to take into consideration. And then the goals and objectives of the conversations in terms of what those goals and objectives are, how different they are as an HR conversation versus what they are as a coaching conversation, and really making that distinction between the two. This is the fun part, I think. and I really want to get some input when I launch these considerations. Looking at the difference in the questions themselves. Very different questions when we are in an HR conversation versus when we are in a coaching conversation. So let's kick this off. Do you know why we are here today? Christine, I see that you recognize that question. Do you know why we are here today? Versus, what do you want to focus on in this conversation? So first off, thoughts on the differences in how those two questions land.
I was chuckling because I've had that somebody have that conversation where, they'll start that, do you know why we're here today? Because you told me to be here, right? Like, I mean, it just incites that negativity and that defensiveness, right? Because either you're thinking I should know,
Yes,
and whether I do or not, but you're telling me I should, and if I don't, I'm going to get defensive. Versus the other one where, what do you want to focus on in this conversation, right? what's your, what are your most important priorities that you want to talk about today? Right. That's how we teach our leaders to talk about one-to-ones. It should be the team member driving the agenda, not you as the leader, right? What do you want to talk about, right? First,
Yes.
obviously the leader needs to have some input. But you know, I chuckles because I've heard that many times. Doesn't go well.
It doesn't go well. And to your point, it drives that defensiveness potentially. What else? What else comes to mind when you see the difference in these two openers to the conversation?
One thing that comes to mind for me is the HR question evokes a defense response or
Mhm.
distress, where the coaching question can evoke eustress. So a positive stressor versus a negative stressor. So it's like you're being stretched, but there's that excitement about being stretched as opposed to distress of what's going to happen. Why am I here?
Yeah. Oh, what a great transition there. Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at the next question. What classes are you taking to advance your career? So this specifically, if we were having a conversation about your next steps as an employee, what classes are you taking to advance your career versus a potential coaching question? How will you get there? What do you see as different in these two questions?
You know, the how will you get there just brings up for me a possibility that, you know, it's not that there's a possibility there, and you're keeping the client in the driver's seat, you're keeping the employee in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Yeah. And how important that is to keep them in the driver's seat.
The first question also limits the modality. It kind of assumes that the only way to advance your career is to take a class.
Yes. Yes, it definitely is limiting. And Donna, I think you said you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say the exact same thing, that when you ask the question, what classes are you taking, you make an assumption and you don't allow for other possibilities.
Yes. Yes. Yes, you and it doesn't open that door, right, to those possibilities.
Jill?
Sorry. Yes. No, please. Yes, Maxine. Nice to see you.
It was I just had to run off unexpected. It was a slight emergency, but it's sorted out. So I'm back. I wanted to answer the do you know why we are here today?
Yes.
And that literally positions the person who really doesn't want to be there to say no, and just and literally stop the communication. So
Yes.
why ask a closed question like that? Because the person will say no if the person was sent. Because I have been in situations where the person was sent for coaching, so it has that stigma, Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes, and you said the phrase close the door.
Mm.
And we all recognize that question as a closed-ended question, right?
Sure.
Literally closing the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. So looking further down in our conversation, are you having problems with your coworkers? Versus what obstacles may hold you back? Thoughts on that?
Another assumption.
Another assumption.
That you have problems with your coworkers.
Leading.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And how interesting, first of all, obviously you all recognize closed-ended question there. And also you are assuming they are having a problem. And a few of you have talked about the defensive stance that may cause, and some of the stress that may cause. What else do you notice about what that question brings up?
I mean, when I hear that question, are you having problems with your coworkers? Why? Did somebody say something?
Yeah.
Right. That's like what pops in my mind, because I might not have
Very
thought I
good.
was having problems. Right. And it could be, there might be an issue, but it might be because there's some other obstacle, and that's a result of it, that it's creating friction because something else is going on and that's affecting, right? It's a rolling effect to that. So it's very limiting, and it's very assuming, like others have said. So, but again, it's that defensive question. I'm going to get defensive if you ask me that question.
Yes.
Absolutely, sure.
Yes. And how important it is to pay attention on the coaching side of the aisle to the obstacles. It's part of what we do as coaches. It's part of what we need to do. We need to examine those. And really the idea that an obstacle may not be what we have inferred as an HR person. An obstacle may not be a problem with the coworker. An obstacle may be a self-limiting idea or their view on themselves. How many times do we ask that question and the answer is, oh, I'm my own obstacle?
Mhm.
When I look at the HR question side,
Mhm.
when I look at that, are you having problems? That feels very blaming and the finger's pointing at me.
Yes.
And the coaching question, I hear support and I hear caring and the opportunity to really talk about what is holding me back.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And that image again of that finger pointing versus that support. So it's such a different feel, isn't it, Darlene?
Yes, it is.
Very different. And I'm sure very different for the person sitting across from you. Yeah. So looking further down, do you need more training for your job? Versus what resources do you have? I think you're seeing a pattern here.
Mhm.
Other thoughts that you have about the idea of these two questions?
Well, Jill, overall, I'm thinking about is this the first time you're meeting the employee? Because good HR people, we know our employees, so this is not the first time we've met. So hopefully we don't ask the question like that on the left, very closed and very almost like we have an agenda. They would call us the police, right? Here come the HR police. So, but resources, it's just having that conversation. And even if it's your first conversation, the coaching questions help to develop that. You can kind of get a baseline of where the employee is. So whether it's your first conversation or the 15th, it still starts to create that inspiring trust and partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. And that key word you said, agenda, of how different it is when we come to the table with an agenda versus our client setting the agenda. So different. How
And
about
I
this?
think,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
that's okay. I was just going to say, I don't know that, especially a new employee, I don't know that they'd be able to answer that question. How do
Mm.
they know what they don't know?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and even what resources do you have that may or may not, a new employee may not be able to answer that. One of the questions I like to ask, particularly new team members, is what areas of the job do you feel really successful in? What areas do you need to, spend more time with? Right. And that kind of helps get to that, because they may not know resources early, right? And a seasoned person would be able to answer that. But trying to get to that piece of, do they need more training? Do we need to provide them more training or different training or something else? But they may not know it. We don't know what we don't know.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
So true. So true. How about this?
It's kind of fun
Oh.
listening to all of you talk, because what I'm I'm hearing is how the coach training is playing into your awareness of how to ask these questions.
Yes.
Because if you reflect back on doing the HR work before you had coach training, it really made a difference in what questions you asked and how you asked them.
Sure.
So this is really super fun to hear this awareness around how to ask these things.
Are we bringing lots of joy to your heart, Kathy?
Totally.
Feel
Totally.
good webinar.
It's awesome.
So how about this one? How about if we follow up on this in 30 days versus what resources do you want? Very different, right? We've learned that in coach training. Resources that you have versus resources that you want. And this idea that we are setting the follow-up as HR, we're setting up the follow-up. And even though it starts with a how much are we inferring? Okay, we are going to have follow-up in 30 days and we've set the timeline versus what resources do you want, which may prompt our client to have a different timeline to gather those resources to move towards action items on their own timeline. And how about this? When our employees may go to training, what did you learn from this training specifically? Great question. What did you learn from this specific training versus, ooh, what are you learning about yourself? Thoughts on that question? Totally different, isn't it? Okay, how about this? What do you want in your next in your career versus how do you want to hold yourself accountable? Yeah.
Really good, Jill. It's that idea of when we learn something and we absorb it, we're more able to then go ahead and apply it. So yes. So anytime we can bring it out, teach someone, is really good. And to ask the employee about themselves, oh, even better.
Yeah. Yeah. And how different it is in an organization when you're asking the employee about their own accountability and the idea that they are doing it as opposed to you are doing it for them.
Yes. Or as opposed to being told.
Being told, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm thinking further in this, that question, what do you want next in your career? How inferring that is that career is the most important thing to them, as opposed to asking for their thoughts on themselves and their goals. How about this one? Do you have any questions before we wrap up this conversation? How do you want to end this conversation? What does that bring up for you? The difference between those two questions.
I would feel managed.
Ah, yes. Managed.
I'll
Yep.
feel rushed. I'll feel rushed.
Yeah.
How do you know I want to wrap up? I'm not yet ready to wrap up as yet, so I'll feel rushed.
Yes. Managed, rushed. What else?
It sounds like you don't want to hear any questions.
Yes. It does sound like that.
Without the time to really think about what the question would be, the default response might be no, and then that just ends the conversation.
Because it's a close, yes,
Yep,
close question.
literally close the door,
Mhm.
just like that.
And it doesn't allow for any type of follow-up, any type of support. It just, okay, we're done. You know, your time's up, get out, next person. You know, it's more about numbers than it is
Mhm.
about truly helping that person, which is,
Yes.
you know, our goal, whatever the topic is, right? That's, it's very ending.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm recognizing what all of you are pointing to is that limiting, closed idea, as opposed to very open and reflective and promoting that awareness of who that person is and their choice. Their choice. So I want to open up the door for questions that you have about what we've covered, and also how you take this information next. What do you do with this information? Now that you have seen some differences between the focus areas and that dividing line, what do you do next with this information?
I have a question.
Yes.
For coaches that are it may be external now, when you are working with a client who is faced maybe with some in dealing with their organization in the closed way, and you're external, you know, how would you go ahead and start working with that client? You know, you're not internal. If you're not internal anymore, you're not able to affect change directly, but it's through the client. I'm just curious, how would you help a client through these situations where they just feel like, you know, they don't have a support internally?
So I want to make sure I answer correctly what you're saying. So you're saying you are not in the organization with them, and they are your client.
Yes, you are working with one of the one of the employees.
Yeah. So what considerations come up for you when you think of that person who maybe you did work with in the organization and now you are in a different relationship? What considerations come up for you?
Good question. You know, the idea that you have to put on the back burner what you may know already about the organization,
Yeah.
you know, and still remain neutral. So you can help support the client in being empowered. So I guess that whole piece about being empowered and how they could ask maybe the right questions to get the resources that they're looking for.
Yeah. And that's such a great point, because you bring up how we show up as coaches to a coaching engagement, and what we know already, as you pointed to, versus showing up for that coaching conversation, showing up for that client, and their focus being the focus. Very, very different. And also I'm thinking similar to when we are coaching with a sponsoring organization, we may have that information from our sponsor about what is going on and how that affects and what we do with that as we show up as coaches. Really important consideration. Yeah, great question.
And I think that same struggle can be from an internal perspective as well, because you may be, like I sit in HR, I may have information about something that's going on, or I may not, going on in another, department, and I'm working with this team member, and we still have to stay neutral, right? We still have to be that neutral person, and we may have more insight of maybe how to ask that question, right? To prompt them a little bit differently. You may have a little bit more insight into that, but sometimes not. I've been working with some leaders, and I don't know anything about where they work or who they work for or what's going on, and so then it's just going through, okay, well, what have you done? Let's talk about what do you need to get the answers, right? And how do you ask those questions in a respectful, not challenging way, and just talking through and helping them in that respect, because even internally, we still have to be neutral and help, but still help them, right? And it's not necessarily providing answers. It's about coaching them through, what does that look like? Let's role play that. Let's, those kinds of things. So even internally, I've had that struggle. Either I know something and I can't say anything, or I don't know. And it's like, okay, well, let's figure out how we're gonna get the answers you need. At least try to.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So that brings up such a great point, Christine, because as you point to, it's whether you're in an organization or whether you're outside of the organization, or whether you are not working with a sponsoring organization and this is your individual client. It sounds like this applies to all three of those situations. Yeah. What else? What else do you do with this information, knowing differences in questions that you've seen, differences in reframing the focus? How does this affect you going forward? What are you learning?
So one of our goals, probably in the next year or so, is really to start really focusing on our HR leaders and coaching them so that they ask the coaching questions and not those HR questions, right? Some of them, some of them know, some of them, they've not been exposed to it. They don't know. And so that's kind of one of our focus areas for, the coming year, is to really focus on our HR leaders and helping them ask better questions, even if it's just to get them to the right resources, and to not come across as the HR police. And they certainly have that role when it gets to some of those disciplinary, and it's the not fun part of their job. But there's other times where it doesn't need to be that in that space, and it's different. And so helping them understand when to, when do they need to use that HR side and that detective kind of close-ended type side, and when do they need to use the more coaching, I don't know if you'd say softer side, but kind of just more of that inquiry side, and helping them understand to do that, and what are those situations. So that's one of our focuses of where we're kind of going to focus on for the next year or so.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such an interesting word that you brought up, the police. It, that I can tell you that I really, that really resonates with me when I was doing HR, that hat, that perception. And it sounds like you're really, in your organization, you're really looking to change the focus so that, yes, your HR leaders can do their job as an HR leader and really shift that focus to some of the really important coaching questions. Yeah,
because in today's world, they do both.
Yeah.
it's not segmented, at least not in my organization. So they wear both hats. And so we need to make sure that they have the tools that they need to be successful. So that's really going to be one of our focuses of many.
I just shared a questionnaire with you in the chat box, and it came out of exactly what you're talking about, Christine. We went in, we have like an abbreviated coach training that we do for leaders who aren't going to be coaches. And that questionnaire came out of some of those conversations. And it's using coaching skills when you have to have those tough conversations.
Yeah, what a great resource to have. I wish I had that early on in my HR career. So I want to give you my contact information if you want further follow-up. You'll all see this slide deck, and you'll have my LinkedIn, my email, and I am definitely available for all of you with any further questions, that I can be a resource for all of you. And I just want to thank you all for your time today, and really bringing out these great observations and this great awareness of the difference between the two roles and the blending of these two roles and how the focus is different. And just want to thank all of you for your time.
Awesome conversation. That was so fun. So thank you to Jill for hosting that and putting that together. That was fabulous. All of you will receive a link to the recording of this on YouTube, and I'll CC Jill so that you'll have her email address there as well, just in case you didn't get a chance to capture it quickly. So you will have access to that. And yeah, let's keep the conversations going. So, thank you, everyone. And Jill, thank you. That was fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.